Johnson and I'm an aero modeller and an engineer. Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aero modelling. Okay, today we're going to look at creating instruments for an instrument panel, and there are ways you can do this. You can take photographs of instruments and scale them and put them behind dials and stuff like that. So I'm going to do something similar, but rather than take photographs, I've actually created the artwork within Illustrator. And you might think, oh good God, that must be really difficult. Well, it wasn't, and it was a good learning exercise, because things like putting these dashes around the outside of a circle, there's a radian tool that does it for you. So it was a good excuse to fire up Illustrator and learn some of these tricks. I did originally do a version with needles on, because I was just going to use the needles, but having watched a video recently, a Dave Platt video, where he put the needles on afterwards and added a bit more depth to it, I thought that would be worth trying. So the instrument panel technique I'm going to use is a Dave Platt technique, where we make a panel with holes in it. We then put a sheet of acetate, then we put a spacer, and then we put another panel with holes in it, and then behind that we put these instruments. Now what I intend to do is scale these to the right size and then position them as they would be on the dash and where the holes are, and then when that one's positioned with dials on, position it behind the acetate and behind the spacing layer. We should have a pretty good panel. We may need to add bezels to the top layer, but I'll show you that as we get closer. But here are the instruments. So here you can see what I've done is I've taken the drawing we made earlier, which has the outline, the black line. It has the instruments, which are also the black lines, centered over where they are on the panel. Okay, so the next step is to print on my Rotorcraft plotter, is to cut masks for the black sections and for the red sections. Obviously for the red ones I'll do the outline as well. So that should give me two masks showing where everything should be. Here is the cockpit of my DB Sport and Scale Auster. I have removed as much of these bulkheads that usually go right across here, and even this is normally a plywood section to that bulkhead down there. Across the front here, this is normally a plywood section attached with big 3/8 lugs going down here to that bulkhead down here. So I have removed a lot of the framework. These carbon tubes have replaced a lot of that framework and should give the strength back. So what I've done is ignore the photograph on this, because the photograph was just to give me an idea, but actually the shape of the model, which is there, that styrene sheet fits in there perfectly. Okay, so that's going to be the basis of my instrument panel. So I've photographed it and I've imported it into Illustrator. So I've selected all the items I want to cut, as you can see. So let's send it and see what happens. And I don't know whether you can see the shine on that, but you can see there is the panel and all the bits and pieces. Right, we'll take this over to the weeding table and get it weeded. To weed, you basically use it to prick out the bits that you don't want. And you can see how well that clutter has cut through. There's no tearing or anything like that, it just does it. These are going to give us the holes that we need to make in that acetate sheet that is the instrument panel. You probably couldn't tell from all of that, but I was using a really light touch. It was I only had to touch it and it was trying to cut it. So I don't like to go all the way to the edge with that because it's a little bit too dangerous. What I like to do is use one of these permarit bars just to finish it off. Just take your time and you'll get there. So for the smaller holes, I'm a bit reluctant, but have to use a needle. But again, just go very gently. And there we go. What I like to do is where you've got a sharp edge like that, I like to just round it off, but only to the instrument side. Now that immediately looks three-dimensional. Well, it does to me. And when you get some paint on it especially, that really will make it pop. And there we have it. So from this side you can see the sharp edge, but from this side, see it's radiused. And now it looks like a miniature piece of 1/4 inch thick aluminium.
So you won't be surprised, I wasn't very happy with the instrument panel that I produced in the last little section, so I scrapped that one and we've started again. I'm doing it a little bit differently. It's slightly simpler in that I'm just going to use a panel, and then I'm going to use an acetate sheet, and then I'm going to use a photograph behind that with the dials printed on it. I dropped the one we made in the previous video, and when I picked it up, half the dials had fallen off. So not dials, sorry, the needles had fallen off. So I thought that's just not going to stand up to the vibrations of an IC engine. So we'll start again, and this time we'll do it a little bit differently. I've made a start and I'll show you what I've done so far. As you can see, here's the panel that I've made. It's a new panel. So what I've done is I've cut the holes out, etc., as you saw in the previous video. What I have done is I've increased the diameters of the holes by 2 millimeters, and this is quite important. Some time ago, I turned on the lathe some bezels. These are instrument bezels, and I did them in several sizes. And these are just 2 that I cast. The idea was that I would make the bezels on the lathe, and then I would make moulds of the 3 sizes that I made on the lathe, and then I could produce as many as I like. And that is one of the larger ones. Obviously it needs cleaning up, but that's exactly as it comes out of the mould. Pop them out and you can make some more. So these were done with a white resin, well, the standard colour that the resin is in. These were done with adding a little bit of graphite powder to the resin to make it a black, a more grey or black colour. I messed around quite a bit with getting the colour right. You can see that one's grey, these were a bit more black. So I just add graphite powder. So the idea is, I've then printed the instrument panel as we did before. I've moved the gauges around just a little bit, so I'm, rather than reproducing what is in an actual aircraft, I've actually moved it around a little bit to suit me. And I think some of it is to correct the parallax error that we had in the subject aircraft, in the photograph. So there's the dials scaled to the right size, and I noticed on the previous one there was a scaling issue as well. As I shrank the dials, some of the lines around the dials edges didn't go down with the rest of the scaling, and that's an odd thing with Illustrator. So this time I've corrected that, and I've also put the dials back, the needles back on. I keep calling them dials. So that's how it looks. And then if you lay the instruments on top, see that obviously there's a bit of acetate in there. pop the instrument panel on top of that, and you get an idea of the effect. As far as the bezel goes, what I've done is I've got a piece of styrene, quite a thin piece, to the shape of the outline of the panel, and then using Illustrator, as you saw in the previous drawings, I drew the areas where the bezel is like that. So these areas of blue I need to build up with a ridge. Now originally I was going to do it in light ply, file it and sand it until it was all the right shape, and I did try that, but it gets so flimsy and so thin that it just broke all the time, and it ended up being a little bit too tall, and to correct it I tried to cut it and shrink it, and anyway it didn't work. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to try and sculpt this in modelling clay, and then I'll make a mould from that sculpted modelling clay surface, and then I'll cast the bezel in styrene resin. The first step at the moment is to airbrush the dash black. You can see I've put some glue dots to simulate the screws. I need to put the two switches back on, airbrush it, and then I need to start building this up with plasticine. As you can see, I have the plasticine shape made. All I've done is sculpt it from plasticine or modelling clay onto a piece of styrene sheet, which is then tacked to the bottom of this Lego structure using some Yoo-hoo pour so I can get it off later. So what I need to do is to fill this, or nearly fill it, with RTV, room temperature vulcanized silicone, and it takes about a day to go off. So the difficulty is knowing how much silicone you need for that, and the way that I would normally do it if I had a smaller surface and everything, I could handle this a little bit easier. I'd fill this with something like table salt, and then tip out the table salt, and that would give you roughly the volume that you need of RTV. But in this case I'm going to guess, so I'm already at 140, and I think I'll go to 100, and well, let's just see how much it takes to I've got to leave enough room in this pot to stir, so that's roughly 170. I think I'm going to go with that. So what I now have to work out is 4% of 170. 4% of 170 is 6.8 grams. Re-zero it. So we need 7 grams of activist. Oh, it's going everywhere. I hate bottles that don't pour. So we're still looking for 7 grams. I think I'm going to go with that. It's fluctuating around. That's about right. Take a stirring stick. I'm going to do this over this surface over here where I can make a mess, because I have a feeling this is going to slop over the sides. Now you have to mix this thoroughly, and I can't emphasize that enough. I've had a lot of trouble in the past where this hasn't been mixed properly. I've ended up with Lego bricks in my toolkit that have had not cured silicone on them for about 5 years, and only today when I opened the Lego tin up did I find that they were finally, after God all those years, finally starting to set, so that I could rub the dried silicone off the sides. At least you get a good indication of the mix by the colour. So I really want to get this mixed properly, and when I don't want to leave it 7 years before I can get this out of the mould, what I usually do is I'll put it in the airing cupboard overnight, and that sort of gets it moving and doing its stuff. I bought a vacuum flask chamber for doing this sort of stuff, to get the air out, because the air is your enemy. However, the piece, or the board, the backing board, is too big, so I need to maybe invest in some more Lego backing boards that are maybe a little bit smaller, because this is just a bit too big perhaps. I don't know how well mixed that is, but I think it's starting to lose its streakiness. I'm trying to get right down into the bottom of the pot to make sure I don't get any in the bottom that's not mixed properly. But I think there's a couple of streaks coming up there, a couple of white streaks. We can't have that. Very useful tool to have in your armoury, this stuff. The only trouble is it has a shelf life of apparently 6 months, and it's quite expensive, so you should really buy it in as you need it. This RTV silicone I'm using here I got from an outfit in the UK called Maragon Arts and Crafts, and this one is May 2019, so as you can imagine it's well out of date, but it still seems to work. So I've had some more expensive stuff than this from a supplier in London, and it literally did last 6 months, and then it was useless, and I had a big tin of it and it didn't get used, so that was a waste. So get the smallest quantity you can, or buy it when you need it, or take a chance. Right, I think that is about as mixed as I'm going to get it. I'm still seeing the odd bit of white there, which is quite infuriating, unless it's just my eyesight. Now, one of the things you really got to try and eliminate in all this is air bubbles. So if you're doing resin casting and that sort of thing of fine parts, you don't want an air bubble in there. This doesn't really matter too much, because it's all going to be coated in it's all going to get sanded down afterwards, so it's not so bad. It's not a delicate, accurate thing, and probably this is a very expensive way of producing this part. But hey ho, it was the best way I could think of, and it gave me an opportunity to show you guys RTV. So what I find the best way to pour this is if you have a long stream, then it kind of forces the air bubbles out. You'll see what I mean. I think I managed to judge the amount I needed about right. You can see all the air bubbles. For the next couple of hours they'll come out and rise to the top, which is what you want. After a couple of hours the viscosity goes up and it gets a bit thicker, and the bubbles don't really want to move then, and they're set, but hopefully they're in the top layer. Right, rather than throw the pot out, I keep the pot with the stick so that it gives me an idea of what state the mix is in. So we'll set that aside for a day, get on with other things. Well, the mould came out of the out of the box, the Lego box, nicely, and as you can see, the part lifted straight out without even damaging the plasticine, which is exactly what a silicone mould should do. Just for information, effectively nothing will stick to silicone. So when you're moulding, you don't have to put release agents in or anything like that. It just works. So we've still got a little bit of residual plasticine in there, but when I pull the first part, it'll pick up most of that and lift it out with it. So the first one might be scrap, might not, might be good enough, don't know. But it's a lot of work to have gone through just to make that bezel. And I've just been on the DB Sport and Scale website, and funnily enough, Richard Bristow, actually sells an entire panel with the bezel, all 3D printed, for £25. So if you can't be asked to do all of this, just go onto the dbsportandscale.co website and you can actually buy one of these if you're doing an Auster. Alright, so what I'm going to do next is we'll mix up some fast cast, which is a resin, a pouring resin that dries very quickly. I'll fill that. I want to try and come this area here is higher than this area here by the thickness of the styrene sheet. So what I want to do is actually fill this up completely, and it should overflow into this center section as well. See, I want this center section. I'm going to cut it out with a slight lip. Well, that's the plan anyway. If it doesn't happen and I just get the bezel, then I'm sure that'll look fine. Let's get some resin. This is the resin I like to use, Resin G26. I think it's a German product, but it's fairly easy to get hold of in the UK. I'm not sure about the rest of the world. Resin G26. So part A and part B, mix it 50-50, goes off in about 5 minutes. I like to leave it a little bit longer until it's good and firm, especially for something like this, which is quite thin and fragile. I like it to go nice and solid. Try and mix a cupful. I'm going to go a 50-50 mix. These are 50ml cups, so I'll try and get to the 25ml line if I can, which is about there. It's given us 22, put the right lid on the right bottle. That is actually at 20ml, so I'm going to take it to 40, and there we are, and it's gone everywhere. Typical. See if I can find a cloth to wipe that up, because it's horrible stuff. Now my real problem is mopping this mess up. My real problem is stuff goes off very quickly, so I can't be messing around cleaning this up. Right, so let's put that away for a minute, get stirring with this stuff. I've mixed way too much. Let's put something down to catch the spills, the inevitable spills. Right, I think that's it. I think we're mixed enough. So here we go. See what's happening? That's already gone solid. So it's been about half an hour now. Part is now cold. This is the excess resin that was in the pot, and you can see it creaking. The stuff on the side is brittle, you can see, and has indeed come out. You can see the really fine surface texture, even scratches in the bottom of the pot from stirring have been reproduced. This is really nice stuff. Resin G26. Okay, this should be hard enough now to pop out. Now what I didn't do, because I was busy doing other things, is I didn't keep my eye on this, and you can see that my bench is not level. And the resin has all run to this end, and really this end is too light. I needed this to be thicker. But I think it will do as a demonstration to show you what is possible. And then we'll try it on the panel and we'll see how it looks. Just going to go right the way around the outside and just break was going to say the adhesion, but there isn't any. Silicone doesn't stick to anything, but I can see that this is flexing, so it's not hard enough yet. So the minute we get this out, I'm going to lay it flat and we'll give it another half an hour. If I try and sand it with it like this, things won't go very well. So now the area that's sticking is this area here. Now if you can try and keep the piece flat and flex the mould, then with a bit of luck everything will stay flat. And there we have it. So there is our bezel. Okay, so what I intend to do is I'm going to let that really flash off, because as you can see, I can bend it. Okay, so I'm actually going to lay it down that way, because if I lay it on this surface, it's not flat. That has a better chance of being flat. So I think what I'll do is just leave that for an hour, then I'll run it on the bench sander, belt sander, and we'll show you. So let's just take a quick walk around of what we've done so far, and you can see the instrument panel actually in place. So there we have the panel in all its glory, with a little bit of dry brushing. I still need to do the throttle mixture carb heat controls, which I will probably do next. Anyway, I hope this has been of interest. It's certainly been an interesting exercise to do, and look forward to sharing some more bits with you